Yeah. Yeah, you did say, yeah, I do remember.
Like, dude, I don't care if you think he's a good president or not. But don't say that.
Yeah, what was the, he's like, it was like 2 a.m. He's like, he addressed his followers.
Yeah, like, I'm addressing all my followers, and I think we got this election in the bag or something. I don't know what he's saying.
Right.
It's like, dude.
Then you wake up and you see Wisconsin and Michigan in Biden's favor.
Yeah, Wisconsin and Michigan just show up out of the blue literally.
Sorry, it's just not coming up. Give me a second.
How has it been since Georgia's been blue?
Did it ever go blue during Obama?
I don't know.
I'll look that up right now.
Because you would think maybe Southern State, especially in that area, that it would be red almost consistently. But
Give me 1 sec. All right. Okay, so it seems to be working. Okay, so a couple things in real fast.
92.
Jesus.
Got a new student last period.
Yeah, Bill Clinton in 1992 after time Georgia voted blue.
That's not too long.
Clinton. Yeah, Georgia looks like it's going to be very tight. If they're going to do, if it's within 1%, most states have a law to go to a recount, but recounts rarely change any more than
300 probably.
Yeah, at most like 200. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah, and so it looks like Nevada, Arizona. I mean, it looks like Biden is going to win. Maybe not North Carolina, but all the other states.
I thought I saw that they were going to call North Carolina red. Maybe like. It wouldn't matter though.
He only needs to win
Nevada.
like one more
Nevada and
state.
Arizona, 6 votes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's going to win the popular vote by 6 or 7 million.
He was up by like 3.7 million last time.
And there's probably 3 million more votes in California because California is California. So,
you did pull it again.
and so it's probably President Biden. Probably will be a President Biden, but the Senate will still be controlled by Republicans, and so nothing will happen unless he does it by executive order. We'll see what he wants to do. But in the state, we've had a revolution. So it's going to be a radically different state. Radically different. And so you guys are just in time to get a front seat of that. So to be really curious, you know, they're planning on
We got a Republican governor.
Republican everything.
Yeah, Republican governor.
Across the board, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much out across the board. And you know, their wish list is to freeze spending, which will cut education. So, you know, college will go up dramatically. You know, get rid of some environmental laws, get rid of worker protection laws. I mean, their idea would be to, they think that will spur economic growth. We'll see, but it's will have a direct impact on all of us in here. So it's going to be really curious to see where that's going to go. But it's going to be a radically different state than what, so kind of we're kind of on a precipice. We'll see where we're going to go. And on that happy note, what's capital?
Your land, your resources, your objects.
So that's the means of production. Exactly. Everyone says capital, you might think of money. It's really common to think money, but you need money to buy all that stuff. So that's why they think it's money, but it's the means of production. So it's everything. What is not capital?
People.
Yeah, they're not capital. They're not capital. But everything else is. And that's why we have this new economic system called capitalism, because we have an economic system that focuses now on the machines. The means of production become key. Before capitalism, almost everything that was bought and sold was produced and made and done by people in their hands. And so they were one and the same. And this would dramatically change the role of virtually all people. And I should add then, this is a huge expenditure. It's very risky to buy this. And so the person who owns this new thing called a factory, which just meant a warehouse, that's where they get the name capitalist, because they own the capital. And there'll be a whole new economic system come out that's called finance, the organizing of the money to buy the capital. And that would turn out to be more profitable than actually producing the goods. It's getting the money. That's the big money. But anyways, this is a new system. Oh, interchangeable parts. What did the British call that? The British and other people in the world, when it came to that world exhibition in 1850, they were just wowed by this American system of having machines mass-produce parts instead of the whole product.
So, American system of industry.
Yeah, that's the American system of industry. The American system of industry. And you don't have the notes?
Not for yesterday, no.
You bring home a different notebook, or?
Yeah, I brought the exact wrong one. It was my
Oh,
first
so it's a
notebook.
nice and empty and clean.
Yeah.
And, oh, who was the guy who brought the big barrel gun parts and dropped it on Jefferson's desk? Yeah, Eli Whitney would be best known for the cotton gin, but this is a big deal. And no, he's lying, but it would trigger this. Go, oh, what are the machines then that make the products? The machines that actually make the product, these are the most valuable machines in the world. We call them robots all the time today, even though they're not robots. The actual machines that make the products. These are machine tools. That should be in the machine tools. Make sure that's the big business, these machines. They made robots was more of an advertising gimmick, and now people say it all the time. But they're going to replace workers. Because think about the people who made these products before. In this number 5, the textile industry, and would be in New England, would be the first major industrialization. The people who made the cloth by hand with looms, they're out of business, aren't they? They can't compete with machines.
They turn out more product compared to the person making the tea.
Yeah. And they have to be incredibly skilled, not near as skilled workers to just operate the machine. And so they went out, they had no chance to compete. But there weren't many of them in the US. That's part of the reason it took off. This is a power loom by James Hargreave. He was an Englishman who invented this power loom, and this would revolutionize production. So the big thing is the textile mills. Why in New England? Water power. They need fast-moving streams that turn the wheels. To use water, the basic idea of a grain mill, where the wheel or the water wheel would turn basically 2 stones to mash grain into wheat. Using the same process, the wheel will turn these turn all these cables and rotate, and that's the power source. You lift the wheel up, shut the whole factory down. And look how complex of an operation that is going to be. You need all these workers working together. They're not individuals working now. They all have to be organized and regimented. And one more thing, see all these belts? Those would turn the power, and when they went to steam, they still would have all these belts, well into the 20th century. And leather belts, especially from cows, would be relatively weak. Where do you think all the bison went? When the procedure was after the Civil War to kill the bison, partially to starve American Indians to death so they completely surrender, which is what happened. And then they skinned them, and they would become the belts. That's what happened to the bison. Well, they'd be basically extinct. And this massive operation, Samuel Slater is given a lot of the credit for bringing this production to the United States, because he was a foreman in a shop in textile mill in Scotland. And Britain had passed laws to make sure that that technology did not leave Britain. By the end of the 18th century, Britain was cleaning up, making money selling these relatively low-cost textiles, and they had control of the market. But Slater memorized much of how a textile mill operated. So clearly he had an unbelievable memory and brought it to the US, got some investors to take a big gamble, and they built the mill just before the Embargo Act. Remember the Embargo Act, no more trade with Britain? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, the textiles we're getting are gone, and there's that mill. And everyone copied it, and thus the beginnings of the textile industry. I should add one very important thing. Yes, he obviously had an amazing memory. But don't forget, people back then had significantly, many times greater memories than people today. Not even close. Every technological advancement leads to people with worse memories. Think about the most basic thing. They couldn't look things up as much as you can now. If you can't look it up, you got to know. And they couldn't buy everything you can buy now. They had to. If you have to know, that means you have to have good memories. So people had significantly better memories in 1400 than 1800. Why? Pre-printing press. Every time there's more technology, I have a better memory than you. Because I'm better. Right? Who's with me? Just agree because I'm giving you the grades. No, because I didn't have the same technological tools you did when I was in high school. So I had to know more. Because it was harder to look things up, and so we just had to know. I had to memorize. And so it's something you have to use to have. And if you allow yourself to be someone who only looks things up, your memory will slide more and more and more. And you will not be able to think. Because if you don't know things, you can't think. So, I'm not saying don't use your tools, but train your memory. There's my little bit of advice for you for the future. Train your memory. You got to do it on your own. School helps a little bit, but you have to train your memory. Because it's something, if you don't use, you lose it. And so therefore, my parents have better memories than me, and so on and so on. And you have better memories than people who are in first grade. Yay. So lord over them. Okay, so that, we're going to get right to this. Those fast-moving streams turning a wheel. What?
Oh, I'm just looking at all the jobs standing around.
If you've ever been there, they got low mountains, fast-moving streams. Perfect place for factories. Now, the problem with that is you're tied to a fast-moving stream. And what if there's a drought? What if there's a flood? I think you see the problems there. Or other factories slowing up the wheels. Lowell would be the center. Over 3,000 employees by 1850, doing nothing but textiles. That's a significant number. And so you go from individual workers working in their home to more and more people going to this big warehouse called a factory and working for somebody else. This is a radical shift. It's a good graph. It's one of those that you really get an idea of just how quickly this grew. That's by 1850. And all through this area, the fast-moving streams. And they would still be using water power into the 20th century at some of these places, or at least as a supplement. And in fact, so many factories went around Lowell that it would be called the Lowell system. The Lowell system. And this is going to be how companies will organize to this day, in a way, the template. Because this is, what I'm telling you here is a radical shift. Before, production was done in people's homes. They'd work at home by their hands, skilled craftsmen or whatever. Now, they have to leave their homes and go to someplace else and work for somebody else. For most people, that was radically different. And you might think, well, yeah, people hired you before. Yes, they did, but it'd be like for a day. It was a different, totally different way of thinking about work. And if you go to Lowell today, the inside of the town is a national park. And they have it all set up like it's still 1835. They still have a couple working textile mills there. And they have storefronts like it's 1835. You can buy some products they actually make there with the textile production. And I heard it was really good, and I'm interested in that, so I went to it. And it greatly exceeded my expectations. It's really cool. The Park Service just nailed it. It's a fun place. You know, the best part with all the different, you can buy food from that area, what you would buy at a restaurant, and it was interesting. To my point of view, tasteless, but the Lowell system. So now you have to bring people to work in this factory. And if you're a factory owner, you're the employer, you made this huge risk to buy these machines. You don't want people working at their own time. You don't want people coming in whenever they feel like working and going home, like people did when they worked for themselves. You don't want people like, oh, I gotta go to the bathroom and not coming back for a half hour. You don't want people taking lunch breaks or dinner breaks. Heck, if you stop the factory, you better stop it for everybody. Not just, better not be for one person. You want people showing up on time, going to the bathroom at the same time, eating lunch, etc. And there's something else you want. If you're an employer, you don't want your workers to go out and do what people did all the time back then. They drank 10 times more alcohol than the people do today. Sunday was a day to drink all day. That's what people did, all day. In fact, they had a term for it. Then Monday would be Blue Monday, because everyone's hungover. You don't want your workers coming in hungover. So you want to control what they do outside of the job too. Not drink, do activities where they'll go to bed early. Convince them that it's for their best good, because it's for the best good of the people running the company so they can make more money. Men were really hard to get to do that. Men in this era were taught, brought up to have this concept of liberty. I can work what I want, not work what I want, and if I want to work all day, I work all day, and the next day I don't want to work, I don't have to work. I'm independent. But somebody, a male in 1820 in New England, they might not have much, but at least they have that. I control that part of my life. So factory owners thought we can't have them. We want to control. We have to control people. Who would they hire? Exactly. And that's what they would have a name for, the low mill girls, where they would get middle young teens to work, bring them all into work so young as 8 to 9. And why women? Because women were taught from day one to obey whom? Yeah, to be subservient to men. This is a great picture, isn't it? Look at all the women here. But we have no doubt who's in charge. There's no doubt. There's no doubt who's in charge. Women obeyed men and were taught that. Women were taught to be subservient. And ironically, they probably had more rights before the Industrial Revolution than during it, but they took advantage of that. Companies did. And they could then train them this very regimented workplace. Go, all get up at the same time. In fact, they kept them in dorms. All go to bed at the same time, wake up, go to work, everything. And this is really going to hit this concept of what freedom is. Do you still have freedom when you go to work for somebody else? Because men at that time were like, I have certain rights. I'm not going to go to work when you tell me to. Yet, do you have freedom? And this is going to be the big fight that will go on to this day. And why young girls? Not only because they could be disciplined, they could be beaten if they don't work, because women were routinely beaten. Yeah, see all these little bobbins here with the thread? They're whirling at full speed when they're making the cloth. And they jam up where the bobbins need to be switched, and they need somebody with really small hands to pop them off and put new bobbins on. Because they don't want to. You shut down the power, especially when it's a wheel, you shut down the power of the whole factory. Make sense? So what's going to happen when they stick their hands through there? Think about a thread whirling at full speed. They get a finger caught, what happens? Stop. Stop. And yes, wrists or other things. And if not gone, they're mutilated. And what happens to the girls? Fired. Yeah, fired. And of course not paid for that day, because they look at the stuff they ruin with their blood. You know, rights for workers, well, you give rights to workers like safer workplaces, that's expensive. You got to pay for it. That's profits. Lose profits. So that's what they use girls. And they regimented every part of their life. First, here's a recruitment for young girls, 15 to 35, but unmarried. They start getting married, boom, they're gone. Unmarried. And this is from one of the Lowell mills since 1853, so it's, you know, in this era, and it has everything regimented. When they get up for the first shift, second shift, and so on. When they eat Saturdays and Sundays, also regimented every moment. The bells will tell them what to do. So the first bell will ring when you know you have to start to work. The second bell will ring, you should be working. The bell would ring when you get a break. The bell would ring when you have, okay, dinner. Dinner was what more people today call lunch. And they regimented it all out. So they control every moment to make sure they work exactly the way they want. Like little machines. But these are humans who might expect certain rights. But you might also think, wait a minute, don't men now mean, would be fairly soon that men would start working in factories. And now today, almost everybody works for somebody else and gives up a significant amount of liberty to make that job. What changed? Couldn't convince men, but boys, young boys, couldn't we teach them to be little factory workers? Yeah.
Well, this is the generation of the school system.
Exactly. The first schools that started this time, how schools organized. How do you know when to be in class? Oh, bells. It works pretty well, doesn't it? You see anybody out there? You all obey really well, don't you? Like a good little worker. Aren't you getting a little hungry right now? Aren't you being conditioned to eat when we let you eat? You have to go to the bathroom, don't you have to ask? Aren't you punished if you're tardy? Aren't all these things exactly what they want to teach factory workers to do? Schools organized on purpose to treat you to be factory workers. Before the Industrial Revolution, no one cared what time it was. Nobody cared. Why would you care? Who cares? You have to be taught. And now my clock isn't working, and some of you probably will be annoyed by that fact because we all, doesn't matter if you like the class or not, we're all trained to look at the clock, aren't we?
That's the first thing I did.
What's that?
That's the first thing I did when I got in.
We all do it, right? Look at the clock, think about the time it is. I mean, heck, little things people wear so they always know what time it is and obey the clock. And that's not a value judgment. That's what happened. But it's remarkable. Just think about it for a second. The bell rings, and okay, we have, and let's say we didn't have A and B day, so we had everybody here. The bell rings, and 1,400 people all of a sudden all do the. It's kind of remarkable. Think about it. You're being indoctrinated every moment. You're being manipulated. That's not necessarily bad. You know, I mean, it could be for your own benefit and do proper techniques, but it's only can get bad if you don't know you're being manipulated. Then it becomes bad. So something to think about. We'll talk more about education, but yeah, you're exactly right. That's from the first public school. No, I don't know a better system, if there is a better system. And can you imagine when we have all 1,400 students here and we didn't have bells and people just kind of do what they want? I'm not sure how they would organize it. We try a little bit with that with the online digital stuff, and think how many people have trouble with that. So maybe we do need structure. I'm not saying it's the best, but I'm glad you're all being trained to be little factory workers. Obey! So with that, it's no coincidence that the first labor unions will come out by young women. Young women, incredibly brave people. So much more brave than men at this time. Would be, women are generally more brave, but, and the big argument, yes, they wanted more pay, but the big thing was, do all workers have rights? Do you have rights once you enter the place of your employment, or do you give up all your rights? And it's not just like, you know, the life is just speech, it's also the right. If you don't have a job in the modern world, you starve. That's a pretty important right. That's that kind of whole, the real life thing. And this is a fight that is going to be going on between employers and employees, and employers and employees to this day, capitalists and labor. And first union, and here's it is pretty, such a pretty girl as I should be sent to a factory and pine away and die. A factory worker's song from girls at that time. And the other thing is this, why unions? If one worker at a big company, maybe just have one person who hired 2 other people, they can talk to their boss, but most places aren't like that. You're one of hundreds, if not thousands of employees. And if one person goes, I demand better conditions on the workplace and higher wages, or I quit, what happens? Probably. Done. You're done. To this day, you're fired. Or ignored, laughed at, or given a job you really don't want to have. But if everybody comes together at once, then they have real power. And that's what workers have learned. If we want rights, we must come together. And so that's going to be the biggest fight. Employers, for which you can understand their thinking, but they want to keep workers disunited. If they're fighting and not unified, they're easier to control one at a time. That's why they're so anti-union. Unions have real power and raise wages. We are a very anti-union country in the United States, intensely anti-union, and it's going to be even more anti-union. And I'm not saying they won the entire battle, but they basically won this concept that you don't have rights once you're in a this. But you can understand their point of view. They make the big investment, don't they? And they're thinking, I made this investment. I can't afford for you to do whatever you want. So there is an understanding. But we'll come back to unions. So you can see this, how the production just exploded up here by 1840. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? It's a little bit more in the south. South, especially down here, slow meandering rivers, not good for water power. But when these start to organize, beginning at the turn of the century, a lot of these factories relocated down here. Workers without unions, you don't have to pay them as much. And then when they start to unionize and organize in the 1960s and 1970s, what happened to all the textile mills? Here. Yeah, China, Mexico, Guatemala. And you see that in the 80s and 90s. Now, we don't make any cloth here, just not. I guarantee you, every shirt you're wearing, everything is made in another country, guaranteed. And I know it's kind of hard to check now. I know because you have to twist and so let's see where my sweatshirt was made of. In China.
American Eagle.
Why? Yeah, American Eagle, made in China.
Not as much to pay your workers.
Yeah, don't pay the workers, don't.
Not as much safety regulations.
Or environmental, exactly right.
Like in India, before, like I saw, there's like little girls like working like on top of each other for like Nike and stuff like that.
That's India and Bangladesh is like that too.
Yeah.
But and we wear their clothes.
I remember I saw something like the whole Colin Kaepernick fights against slavery, but it's kind of ironic how they use like kid slavery and like in like China, like workers are virtually paid nothing to make those clothes. I just think it's kind of ironic.
It's a really tough one because it's the world we inhabit, but at the same time, those are conscious choices made by people that we could change.
Participate in society's benefits.
But people make a lot of money, and we want to pay lower cost for clothes. And it's easy not to think about it if you don't see it. So now you need consistent steam. Consistent steam. Consistent power. Oh, aren't you sad that the hammer time clock has died? It's so sad.
It's like a
Yeah.
cardboard cover or something.
So I was playing games like, see, this is done. Yeah, anytime you want. We got plenty of time. All right, so steam power. Iron and coal, because they've been using coal for a very long time, and iron for a very long time, but the big resources are in the Appalachian Mountains. In the Middle Atlantic, we're talking these states right here. Look at this map, just real quick. Right here. New York, Pennsylvania, and stretching into here. The mountains there, perfect for coal mines. Now, iron production would be all over, but when they started building the factories next to the coal, because that's what the power supply was. And so that's why you get all the first real factory, the big industrial growth hitting here. And if you've ever heard the term Rust Belt, that's when they shut those factories down. It's kind of the same reason I told you about with workers. You don't have to pay as much. Factories rusting, old factories, Rust Belt. And the workers who used to make pretty high-paying union jobs no longer have those jobs anymore. So it's a tough area. And Middle Atlantic, why that? It's on the Atlantic, and it's in the middle between New England and the South. It's not New England, it's not the South, it's there.
It's in the middle.
And even though it's not technically the middle, you get the same thing like you've heard in the Middle East. That's to the British point of view. The East was Japan and China. So what's in the middle? That's called the Near East, because it's the East, but it's nearer. But you have somebody there, and it's like, it makes no sense to them. Didn't really make much sense to us now, but we are stuck with it. So they build these factories. Here's the Union Iron Mill in Pennsylvania, near the coal. That's what they needed for the heat. And there are coal miners then. And you'll notice young and old. So young boys working in these mines, incredibly dangerous. Thousands would die every year in these mines. Those mules would live and die in those mines. Born to work to death, which is one of many tragedies of this. These are breaker boys. Paid almost nothing, 10 to 12 years old. But since they're relatively small, they could fit over the chutes, sit on these boards, and using their hands or feet, they'd break up the big pieces of coal. Can you imagine that job? And if they fall on the chute, they're mangled. If they fall off, coal's going down fast. If it's slow, you have less production, less profit. And so that's iron and steel, but the big thing is, got to do it for something. Modern iron production and coal would fuel the power source of the first industrial revolution. Iron. Did I say iron? Steam. James Watt would make the first steam engine in Britain. He had perfected what's called the Newcomen engine, which was the first steam engine just to pump water out of mines. You dig down, it's going to fill with water. Go to Butte. That's the remnants of that. All those hard rock mines, now they all run into the open pit because they're below the water table. Don't drink the water. It always makes me sad when birds land in there, because, you know, very sad. But he perfected and made it efficient where it could be a power source for factories, and then for boats, and then for railroads. And this is a museum in London. Here is the first patented steam engine in the United States. It's Oliver Evans, but he just blatantly stole Watt's idea. And this would be the fuel, the power of the modern world. And to show you quickly how it goes, see this wheel here? This up and down will turn this wheel. So all the belts in a factory or a steam engine. And this was an attempt at a steam-powered car. I think you see the problem right away. It's a twofold problem. First off, it's so heavy, it just sinks in the mud. Rails make more sense. And this is either incredibly hot, you can't be next to it, or it blew up a lot. So you go through drivers pretty quick.
It kind of looks like those oil rigs where they bob up and down.
Oh yeah, the hammerhead oil rigs.
Yeah.
Same process though. That hammerhead, that turning of it, will create a vacuum. That's the pump.
Yeah.
And so that's what the first use of it was the steam engine was for pumping out mines. This is how it works here. That's water. You heat the water, so you need coal or wood. Coal will be the most efficient. Until, you know, the internal combustion engine is similar to this, a little different. And what they would do is, they would put steam into this piston. And it would push up the cam, and that would, so it would lock up. Make sense? And then they would do two things at once. Release, so it's got to be really fast, but release the steam, but shoot a little jet of cold water in there. And when they shoot that jet of water, the steam condenses really fast, and that creates a vacuum. And what does that do? Pull that candle. And then up, down, up, down, up, down. And that is the engine of the modern world. Now, it takes really advanced ironwork to make this, but once you have this, this will fuel so many innovation. And you're right, it really is amazing. The brilliance behind this. And the thing is, you can start seeing it in the 19th century. The countries that could make these on their own would have a huge advantage over everybody else. And the gap between the countries would just accelerate. It's no coincidence, by the end of the century, that's when you have this mass colonization of everywhere by countries that had steam. Get resources, but they could just dominate other countries. They didn't have the technology.
They didn't have to buy imports.
Which, there goes your money. And we are still living on the advantage that came from this. And innovation breeds other innovation. And that's why we have innovation. And make sure you understand that concept. Once you invent something, it will trigger potentially, once you have a fuel source, you need that power source of it. A whole, one innovation will lead to a bunch of different innovations. And then each one of those will lead to more innovation and more innovation. Once you have that initial starter, you can see it the textile mills, and we can have this factory system, but once they had the power source, wow, did it fuel innovation. And some of these you already know how. It's actually just a brilliant design, an American. What's that? The first sewing machine in the 1840s. Now this one's hand cranked, but you can imagine putting a wheel to this, or a belt to this and turning it. And if you've ever sewed, who sewed?
I've seen my grandparents and my mom.
A little bit, and I've tried it. My mom sewed, yeah, so. It's amazing, this process. If you watch the actual sewing machine, they use the same basic design today as Eli's house. A pretty remarkable design, but like overnight, even if you had the textiles, you still had to make it by hand. So everybody, you'd make their own clothes individually. Overnight, the number of shirts, pants, all that came out, just exploded in numbers. And people could have different style of clothes, but also you notice everyone starts wearing the same kind of clothes. Make sense? And in Civil War, when they had to make all the uniforms for soldiers in the North, that's where you get the sizes. They literally, the quartermaster corps said, what's the average person? Average man size. Okay, well, that's medium. That's where that comes from. So our sizes come from the Civil War once you start producing it this way. Next, what did Morse produce? What did he invent?
The telegraph.
Yeah, the telegraph and then the Morse code, so you can use the telegraph. So everyone got that Morse and the telegraph. A revolution, an absolute revolution. So, has a little battery, and it shoots a little electrical pulse down a steel cable. And the steel cable, they weren't using copper yet. Well, when copper and electricity would hit, gee, I wonder what town in Montana will explode to 120,000 people. Speaking of huge again, but it would bleed out about every 10 miles, 10 to 20, 15 miles, electricity would. So every 15 miles, there has to be a telegraph station. And there'd be somebody listening to, more of those like really crude headphones is what they look like, and all you hear is a little bit of static. And that's why you need Morse code. Short bits of static, long bits of static, dot, dash. If you look at Morse code, anybody ever try to learn it? I did once and finally gave up. But that is where a revolution. Hard to even imagine the revolution. And they've been talking about this, but now you have a combination of a power source, but a real big need, especially for railroads. Think about railroads. You have a train coming this way and a train coming this way. You have issues. You need to be able to communicate. Or train coming this way, bridge out. You need to be able to communicate. So railroads, you had this necessity. Innovation breeds other innovation. And remember I told you yesterday about trains, and I said about every 15 miles there had to be a watering or fuel station. Eventually go up to 30. Isn't that exactly how far this thing will go? So you'd have along the railroads, a telegraph station, a watering station, and a fueling station, and that would be the beginnings of a town. On the railroad. And that's why if you go across areas, you think there's no reason for a town. Oh yeah, there's a railroad. What's that?
Like the High Line. All
Yeah.
those little towns that pop up.
And you know, they're like every 15 to 30 miles. And like, why is Freud here? Because it was a watering station on the Great Northern Railroad. Or you go, Roundup. There's no reason to Roundup. Oh, the Northern Pacific Railroad. And another thing. Oh, so the task thing, you ever heard the game, telegraph or telephone, where you whisper to one person, you go through a bunch of different people and see how the message will change? That's the reality of this. Because it has every 15 miles, you have some guy who might have been on there for 20 hours straight, hears it, sends it down the line, and all it takes is a few dots differently, you have a whole different message. And SOS, anybody know why SOS? SOS doesn't mean anything. S, dot, dot, dot. O, dash, dash, dash. So if there is an emergency, they could send a telegraph operator to send that out, and there'll be no mistaking those letters, because it'd be easy to understand and easy to send in case you're a little hairy, let's say. Then, you heard people say save our ship. That came after.
Yeah.
And okay, I'll look at finish on this. We'll finish it tomorrow. I'm going to run upstairs real fast. You can have your lunch. Oh, you won't be here tomorrow. So good luck tomorrow. You know they're good, but what the heck, right?
Yep.
I'll play the game.
That's right.
And trust me, they're thinking about where got Sentinel. You know they're thinking.
Yeah, they're thinking Bozeman and Omaha here.
Yeah, we'll get Helena High or Bozeman, then we'll get, you know what?
Hello, Bruins. We have a grand prize winner for the TikTok B-Day Challenge. Would Rachel Stacy and Kennedy Pocha please come down to the Career Center to get your group's $10 gift cards to Evolve Nutrition. Also, the Halloween winner of the door decorating contest was Mrs. Van Dam. Congratulations. Now, this week's contest is Guess That Lyric. The first 2 students to the Career Center with the song title, the singer, and the next 5 lines of the song will receive a treat.
Lines, that's what.
Let's see what it is. Oh, you guys weren't here. You did this on Monday for April.
All right, go Brew.
If you know it, you can run. If you don't,
Go. Tucker, run.
you're already there.
When I first started, I couldn't tell his Michael Jackson. I was like, are they playing fucking K-pop? I was like, holy fuck. This one was scared. I was like, no one here knows Korean, so that's gonna be really weird. So no one's there. You come out of this class conservative. I know, but how, even with this shit, it's like, how the hell do you,
Like the whole union part.
the union's part, the people are like, I don't wanna go to fucking work. Why do I go to schedule?
That's why like Butte always votes Democrat. Because Democrats support unions and obviously the mines and.
Yeah. Makes sense. I guess farmers and things have like, yeah, value. No, it's so fucking weird.
I don't know why farmers vote Republican anymore. Like Ronald Reagan screwed them.
Yeah, Ronald He was just like, all right,
Only
hello, rural America.
the only group that benefited from Ronald Reagan was that like
Cowboys.
yeah,
Cowboys.
white rich
Yeah, rich white guys. That's it.
like middle class suffered. I don't know why people. I mean, obviously, it sounds like he wasn't a terrible guy.
It's conservative propaganda to keep the rich in power.
Hello, Bruins. This is Audie Tupper speaking. Just a quick announcement about AP tests. So, students enrolled in AP classes. Registration and payment for the AP exams is now open. You and your parents should have received an email with all of the information. The cost for each AP exam is $100, and each payment must be made by November 6th. That is tomorrow on Friday. So if you plan to take the exam, you must first register with your class join code in My AP, and then pay the exam fees through RevTrack or with the bookkeeper by tomorrow. A late fee of $40 will apply if you do not get that fee in by this Friday, November 6th. So if you have any questions, please contact Mrs. Berg in the counseling department. All right, that's it. Have a good day and go Brew.
Because I already signed up for the class or whatever. I'm pretty sure I did.
Don't forget, you have to pay for the, you heard that? Pay for the test?
I already paid the fee. And I'm pretty sure I'm registered for your class through the AP site. Is that all I have to do or?
As far as I know, yeah.
Because like, I know they said pay your fee, but I don't know what else because I'm pretty sure I'm registered.
As long as you're registered and paid, I think that the school will pass on who to get a test for.
Yeah, because I'm positive I signed up for your class through the AP college board.
Like I said, we did that, I sent out those numbers like the first couple of days, didn't I?
Yeah, I remember. I'm positive I did. I don't know.
Did you pay online or go to the business office?
We paid through RevTrack.
I guess it works pretty slick. That's what I've heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you haven't paid, please pay. I know, I wish it wasn't in November, but that's the world we have it.
Like you can make your decision like maybe 2 months before after you've
I remember
experienced
freshman
the class
year,
a little bit more.
You had to sign up by like March 15th or.
Yeah,